The bank notice trembled in Clara Thompson's hands as she stood on the dusty porch of her modest ranch house, watching the sun blaze over the red rock cliffs of Parowan, Utah in the summer of 1882. 3 months since Thomas died in that mining accident, and now this final blow. 30 days to pay $800 or lose everything he had worked for, everything they had built together in their 5 years of marriage. She was 24 years old and drowning. The ranch stretched out before her, 50 acres of scrubland that Thomas had somehow coaxed into supporting a small herd of cattle, and a vegetable garden that kept them fed through the harsh winters. Now the garden wilted in the July heat. The cattle needed feed she could not afford, and the mortgage holder in Cedar City had grown tired of her promises. Clara folded the notice and tucked it into her apron pocket, refusing to let the tears fall. She had cried enough these past months. Thomas would not want her to give up, but she had no idea where to find that kind of money. The ranch brought in maybe $200 a year in good times, and these were not good times. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the road. A rider approached slowly, a tall figure on a buckskin horse, leading a pack mule behind him. Clara shaded her eyes against the afternoon sun, watching as the stranger drew closer. He wore dusty trail clothes, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, and sat his horse with the easy confidence of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. "Afternoon, madam," he called out as he reached the fence line. He touched the brim of his hat politely. "Name is Wyatt Patterson. I am looking for work, and I heard in town you might need a ranch hand." Clara studied him carefully. He looked to be in his late 20s, with sun-weathered skin and sharp green eyes that held a quiet intelligence. His clothes were worn but clean, his gear well-maintained. Everything about him suggested capability, but she had no money for wages. "I appreciate you riding out here, Mr. Patterson, but I am afraid there has been a misunderstanding. I cannot afford to hire anyone." Wyatt dismounted with fluid grace and approached the fence, keeping a respectful distance. "Mrs. Thompson, if I may speak plain, I know your situation. Not the details, but enough. Your husband passed, God rest him, and you are trying to keep this place running alone. I am not asking for much in wages. Room and board and whatever you can spare when the cattle sell. I have been working ranches since I was 14 years old. I know horses, cattle, and fixing things that break. Let me help you keep this place going." There was something earnest in his voice that made Clara hesitate. She needed help desperately. The cattle needed tending, fences needed mending, and a dozen other tasks piled up faster than she could manage alone. But the notice in her pocket weighed heavy. What was the point of hiring help when the bank would take it all in 30 days anyway? "Mr. Patterson, I thank you for the offer, truly, but I have to be honest with you. The bank holds a note on this property, and I have 30 days to pay $800 or I lose everything. Even with help, I cannot make that kind of money in time. It would not be right to take you on when I might not have a ranch come September." Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting over the property, taking in the sagging fence posts, the barn that needed new boards, the garden struggling in the heat. When he looked back at her, something had shifted in his expression. $800 is a considerable sum," he said slowly. "But it is not impossible. If you will allow me, I would like to propose something. I have money saved. Not a fortune, but enough. I could pay off your debt to the bank, and you could pay me back over time as the ranch allows. No interest, just the principal whenever you are able." Clara felt her heart lurch. "Mr. Patterson, I cannot accept charity from a stranger. That would not be right." "It is not charity, madam. It is an investment. I have been drifting from ranch to ranch for 10 years now, never having a place of my own. I have the skills and the work ethic, but not the land. You have the land, but need help running it. We could make this work together as business partners of a sort. You keep ownership of your ranch, I help you run it, and eventually I get my money back. Everybody benefits. It sounded too good to be true, and Clara had learned that things that sounded too good to be true usually were. Why would you do this for someone you have never met? Wyatt shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable for the first time. My mother was in a similar situation when my father died. I was too young to help much, and we lost our farm in Missouri. She took in laundry and sewing to feed us, worked herself near to death. I swore then that if I ever had the means, I would help someone else not go through what she went through. Your situation reminded me of hers. That is all. Clara felt something crack in the careful walls she had built around herself since Thomas died. This stranger had no reason to help her, no reason to care. Yet here he stood offering her a lifeline she had not dared hope for. It went against every cautious instinct she had, but desperation and something deeper, some intuition she could not name, made her nod slowly. If we do this, it has to be a proper business arrangement, she said firmly. I will pay you back every cent, with a fair wage for your work deducted from what I owe, and I need you to understand that this ranch barely makes enough to keep going. There may be lean years before you see your money returned. I understand, Mrs. Thompson. I am not worried about that. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Patterson, and I am more grateful than I can properly express. Wyatt smiled then, a genuine warm expression that transformed his weathered face. No need for gratitude, madam. We will make this place thrive, you will see. Now, is there room in that barn for my horse, or should I set up camp somewhere on the property? There is a small room attached to the barn that the previous owner used for a hired man. It is not much, but it has a bed and a stove. You are welcome to it. They worked out the details over the next hour. Wyatt would ride into Cedar City the next day with the money to pay off the bank note. In the meantime, he settled his horse in the barn and moved his few possessions into the spare room. Clara found herself watching him work, noting how he spoke gently to his horse, how he checked each board in the stall before trusting it to hold, how he moved with efficient purpose. That evening, she cooked dinner for two for the first time since Thomas died. It felt strange having someone else at her table, but Wyatt was easy company. He spoke about his years working various ranches across Utah and Nevada, the different methods he had learned, the country he had seen. He asked intelligent questions about her cattle, the local weather patterns, what crops grew best in the area. Thomas always said this land could support twice as many cattle if we had better water management, Clara said, surprising herself by speaking her late husband's name without the usual catch in her throat. There is a spring up in the hills that flows year-round, but the water mostly just runs off and gets lost. He had plans to build a proper irrigation system, but we never had the money or time. Wyatt leaned forward with interest. That could make a real difference. Good water is everything in this country. Maybe we could start small, dig some channels to direct the flow to your pastures and garden. I have done that kind of work before. They talked until the stars filled the sky outside, and Clara felt something she had not felt in months: hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could save this place after all. The next morning, Wyatt rode out before dawn to make the long trip to Cedar City. Clara spent the day working in the garden, her mind restless with worry despite herself. What if he simply took off with his money? What if this was some elaborate scheme she was too desperate to see through? But when the sun began to set and she heard hoofbeats on the road, relief flooded through her. Wyatt dismounted looking dusty and tired, but he held up a paper with a satisfied expression. It is done. The note is paid in full. This ranch is yours free and clear, Mrs. Thompson." Clara took the receipt with shaking hands, reading the official stamp and signature that declared her debt satisfied. Tears she had been holding back for months finally spilled over, and she did not bother to hide them. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." "You are welcome," Wyatt said gently. "Now, how about we start fresh tomorrow? I noticed your cattle looking a bit thin. We should move them up to that north pasture where the grass is better, and I would like to take a look at that spring you mentioned." True to his word, Wyatt threw himself into the work of the ranch with tireless energy. He rose before dawn and often worked until Clara had to call him in for supper. Within 2 weeks, he had mended all the fence lines, shored up the barn roof, and started the process of digging irrigation channels from the spring. The cattle began to fill out with better grazing, and the garden exploded with growth once it had steady water. Clara found herself working alongside him more often than not, holding boards while he hammered, helping string new fence wire, discussing plans for the future. They fell into an easy partnership, anticipating each other's needs and movements. Wyatt never overstepped or made her feel like he was taking over. He always asked her opinion, deferred to her judgment on matters concerning the ranch, treated her as the owner she was. But something else was growing between them too, something neither of them spoke about. Clara noticed how her heart lifted when she heard him singing to the cattle in his rough but pleasant voice, how she found excuses to bring him water or coffee while he worked, just to talk for a few minutes. How she caught herself watching him when he did not know she was looking, admiring the strength in his arms as he worked, the concentration on his face, the gentleness in his hands when he treated a cow with a cut hoof. For his part, Wyatt seemed to find reasons to come to the house more often than necessary. He carved her a new handle for a broken rake and sanded it smooth as glass. He brought her wildflowers he found while checking the cattle, presenting them with an almost boyish shyness. He listened to her stories about Thomas without jealousy or discomfort, understanding that her grief was not something that threatened what was growing between them. Late August brought the annual town social, a dance and picnic that drew folks from all the surrounding ranches. Clara had not planned to attend. She had skipped it the previous year, too deep in her grief, and assumed she would skip it again. But Wyatt mentioned it one evening over dinner. "I hear the whole town comes out for it," he said casually. "Music and dancing and all kinds of food. Sounds like a good time." "It is usually quite nice," Clara agreed. "Thomas and I went every year before." She trailed off, the familiar ache returning. "You should go this year," Wyatt said, his green eyes steady on hers. "You have been working yourself near to exhaustion getting this place running again. You deserve an evening of fun." "I do not know. It might be strange going without him." "Then do not go without him. His memory goes with you everywhere. But you are still here, Clara, still living. He would want you to live fully, not just survive." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something in the way he said it made warmth spread through her chest. "Would you come too? I mean, if you wanted to. Everyone would like to meet the man who has been helping me save the ranch." Wyatt smiled slowly. "I would be honored to escort you if you would have me." The night of the social arrived warm and clear, stars already beginning to appear as Clara finished dressing. She had only one good dress, a blue cotton one that Thomas had always liked, and she had not worn it since his funeral. Her hands shook slightly as she buttoned it, feeling like she was crossing some invisible threshold. Wyatt was waiting by the wagon when she came out, and the look on his face made her pulse quicken. He had cleaned up, shaved, put on what were obviously his best clothes. He looked handsome and almost nervous, which she found endearing. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Patterson." I think after 2 months of working together every day, you could call me Wyatt. All right then, Wyatt. And you should call me Clara. The social was held in a large field just outside town, lit by lanterns strung between poles. A small band played fiddle music while people danced or gathered around tables laden with food. Clara felt self-conscious at first, aware of the curious looks and whispered conversations. The widow Thompson had brought the mysterious stranger who had apparently saved her ranch. But Wyatt stayed close, his presence solid and reassuring. He introduced himself to her neighbors with easy courtesy, answering their questions without revealing too much. He complimented the food, admired children, and generally charmed everyone he spoke to without seeming to try. "He seems like a good man," Mary Henderson said, pulling Clara aside. Mary was one of the few women in town Clara considered a true friend. "And the way he looks at you, dear heart. Are you sure he is just helping with the ranch? Mary, do not start. He has been very kind to me, that is all." "He is my employee." "An employee who paid off your mortgage out of his own pocket. Clara, that is not normal employer-employee relations. That man cares for you." Clara felt her cheeks heat. "Even if that were true, it has only been a few months since Thomas passed. It would not be proper." Mary squeezed her hand. "Thomas was a good man and you loved him. No one questions that, but he is gone and you are still here. There is no shame in finding happiness again, especially with someone who treats you well. Think about it." Before Clara could respond, the band struck up a lively reel and Wyatt appeared at her elbow. "Would you like to dance?" She hesitated. She and Thomas had loved to dance together. It had been one of their favorite things about these socials. Dancing with someone else felt like a betrayal somehow. Wyatt seemed to sense her reluctance. "Just one dance," he said softly, holding out his hand. "That is all I am asking for. One dance with the bravest, strongest woman I have ever met." Something in his words, in the gentle sincerity of his gaze, made her decision. She placed her hand in his. "One dance." He led her onto the floor where other couples were already spinning and laughing. The fiddle music was bright and quick, and Wyatt proved to be an excellent dancer. He guided her through the steps with confidence, his hand warm and steady at her waist. Clara found herself laughing as they whirled, the movement and music lifting her spirits in a way she had not felt in far too long. When the song ended, she was breathless and smiling. "Another?" Wyatt asked hopefully. She nodded, unable to resist, and they danced again, and then again. By the fourth dance, a slower waltz, Clara had stopped thinking about propriety or what people might say. She was simply in the moment, moving with Wyatt, acutely aware of every place their bodies touched. "Thank you," Wyatt said quietly as they swayed to the music. "For trusting me enough to let me help you, for giving me a chance when you had no reason to." "I should be thanking you," Clara replied. "You saved everything for me. I do not know how I could ever properly repay you. You already have. These past 2 months working on your ranch, eating meals with you, just talking in the evenings, those have been the happiest times I have had in years. I have never felt like I belonged anywhere until I came to your place. So really, we are even." Clara looked up at him, seeing the vulnerability in his expression, the hope and fear mixed together. Her heart, which she had thought permanently locked away in grief, opened like a flower toward sun. "Wyatt, I need to tell you something. When you first showed up, I thought you were too good to be true. No one does what you did without expecting something in return. But you proved me wrong. You have been nothing but honorable and kind and hardworking. And somewhere along the way, I started looking forward to seeing you every morning. Started listening for your voice. Started feeling things I did not think I would ever feel again." His hands tightened on her waist, his eyes searching hers. "What kind of things?" She took a breath, gathering her courage. The kind of things a woman feels when she is falling in love. The music seemed to fade away, the other dancers disappearing. There was only Wyatt, staring at her with such intensity she felt she might catch fire. "Clara," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I have been in love with you since the second week I was there. Watching you fight so hard to save your home, seeing how strong you are, how kind even when life has been cruel to you. You are everything I never knew I was looking for. I did not say anything because I did not want to push you, did not want you to think I had ulterior motives. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then I am the luckiest man alive." "I feel it," she whispered. "I feel all of it, and it terrifies me because I lost Thomas, and I know now how much it hurts to lose someone you love. But I also know that Thomas would not want me to be alone forever, afraid to open my heart again. He would want me to be happy." "I will do everything in my power to make you happy," Wyatt promised, "for as long as you will let me." They finished the dance in charged silence, both overwhelmed by what had just been spoken aloud. When the song ended, Wyatt led her away from the crowd, toward the edge of the field where shadows pooled beneath a stand of cottonwood trees. "Is this all right?" he asked. "I just wanted a moment alone with you." "It is more than all right." They stood facing each other in the darkness, the distant music and laughter providing a soft backdrop. Wyatt reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his work-roughened hands. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Please," Clara breathed. His lips met hers gently at first, a soft question that she answered by leaning into him. The kiss deepened, and Clara felt the last of her walls crumble. This was different from how it had been with Thomas, but that did not make it wrong. It was simply new, simply its own thing, and it was right in ways she had not expected. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you properly," he said. "Want to do this right, not rush anything, not make you feel pressured." "I want that too," Clara agreed. "We have time now. The ranch is safe, we are building something good. We can let this grow naturally." And they did. The rest of that summer and into fall, their relationship deepened alongside their partnership on the ranch. Wyatt courted her with old-fashioned persistence, bringing her small gifts, taking her on picnics up by the spring, sitting with her on the porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. They worked together during the day and grew closer each evening. Wyatt told her about his difficult childhood, the years of drifting and searching for purpose. Clara shared stories about her life with Thomas, her dreams for the future, her fears and hopes. They learned each other thoroughly, building a foundation of friendship and respect beneath the romantic love. When October came and the cattle were ready for market, they drove the herd to Cedar City together. The cattle sold well, bringing in enough money to buy supplies for winter and start paying back what she owed Wyatt. He protested when she tried to give him money, but she insisted. "We agreed this was a business arrangement," she said firmly. "I pay my debts." "Fine," he said with a grin. "But I am using this money to buy materials to build a proper addition onto the house. That little room in the barn is getting cold, and I was thinking, well, I was hoping I might not need it much longer anyway." Clara felt her heart skip. "And why is that?" "Because I am hoping, if you are agreeable, that we might get married come spring. I know it has not been a year since Thomas passed, and if you need more time, I understand completely. But I love you, Clara Thompson. I want to spend my life with you, building this ranch together, building a family if we are blessed that way. What do you say?" Clara had known this was coming, had thought about it during long nights when sleep would not come. She had worried about what people would say, about whether it was too soon, about whether she was betraying Thomas's memory. But in the end, the answer was simple. "Yes," she said, smiling through happy tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Wyatt Patterson. Spring sounds perfect." They announced their engagement at church the following Sunday, and while there were a few raised eyebrows at the relatively short mourning period, most people seemed genuinely happy for Clara. They had watched her struggle after Thomas died, had seen how hard she fought to keep going. No one could begrudge her finding happiness again with a man who had proven himself honorable and hardworking. Winter came harsh that year, with snow piling deep in the valleys and bitter winds howling down from the mountains. But the ranch was prepared. They had plenty of hay stored for the cattle, enough food put by for themselves, and wood stacked high for the stove. Wyatt moved into the house when temperatures dropped below freezing, sleeping in Thomas's old room, maintaining propriety even though Clara sometimes wished they did not have to wait. Those long winter evenings were precious. They sat by the fire, Clara mending or knitting, Wyatt carving or reading aloud from whatever books they had. They played cards and told stories and made plans for the spring. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, content to be near each other. "Tell me about the wedding you imagine," Wyatt said one snowy evening in January. Clara set down her knitting, considering. "Nothing too elaborate. The church in town with Pastor Williams officiating. Mary Henderson as my witness, and maybe you could ask Henry from the feed store to stand up with you. A simple meal afterward at the house for close friends. That would be enough for me." "That sounds perfect," Wyatt agreed. "Though I am buying you a proper ring, I have been saving for it." "You do not have to do that. You have already given me so much. I want everyone to know you are my wife, want you to have something beautiful that shows how much I love you." The months crawled by with the particular slowness of winter, but finally, March arrived with its promise of renewal. The snow began to melt, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. Birds returned to nest in the barn rafters. The cattle, thin from the long winter, began to gain weight as fresh grass emerged, and Clara and Wyatt began preparing for their wedding. It was set for the first Saturday in April, early enough to avoid the busy spring planting season, but late enough that the roads would be clear. Clara made herself a new dress, simple cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar that Mary helped her sew. Wyatt bought the ring he had promised, a gold band with a small diamond that must have cost him several months' wages. The night before the wedding, following tradition, Wyatt stayed in town at the boarding house. Clara found she could barely sleep, nervous and excited in equal measure. Was she doing the right thing? Would Thomas approve? Would she and Wyatt be happy? But when morning came and she stood in the church vestibule, waiting to walk down the aisle, all her doubts evaporated. Through the open door, she could see Wyatt standing at the altar, looking nervous and proud and so handsome in his new suit. When his eyes met hers, the love in them was unmistakable. The ceremony itself was simple and beautiful. Clara spoke her vows in a clear voice, meaning every word. When Wyatt slipped the ring on her finger and said, "I do," she felt truly married, truly committed to this new chapter of her life. They celebrated with friends at the ranch afterward, everyone bringing food and well wishes. It was nothing like her first wedding, which had been larger and more formal. But it was right for who she was now, for the life she and Wyatt were building together. When the last guest finally left as the sun was setting, Clara and Wyatt stood on their porch, watching the sky turn gold and pink over the red cliffs. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Patterson?" Wyatt asked, his arm around her waist. "It feels right," Clara said honestly. "Different from before, but right in its own way. How does it feel to finally have a home of your own?" "Like everything I went through was worth it because it led me here to you. I love you, Clara." "I love you too, Wyatt, so very much." He kissed her then, tender and passionate, and led her inside to begin their married life together. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch thrived under their joint management. They expanded the herd, improved the irrigation system, built a new barn, and added rooms to the house. Clara paid back every cent she owed Wyatt within 3 years, though he insisted it had never really been a debt. In the spring of 1884, Clara gave birth to their first child, a son they named William. 2 years later, a daughter followed, whom they named Rose. The house filled with the noise and chaos of children, and Clara often thought how strange and wonderful life was. She had loved Thomas deeply, and his loss had nearly destroyed her. But from that destruction had come this new life, this second chance at happiness. Wyatt proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving with the children. He taught William to ride almost before the boy could walk, and he was gentle and affectionate with Rose, letting her follow him around the ranch like a tiny shadow. Clara sometimes stood on the porch, watching Wyatt play with their children in the yard, and marveled at how full her heart felt. She thought of that terrible day when the bank notice arrived, when she thought she had lost everything. If someone had told her then that within a few years she would be happier than she had ever been, she would not have believed them. But here she was, watching the man she loved swing their daughter into the air while their son chased chickens around the yard, living in the home she had fought so hard to keep, surrounded by the life they had built together from ashes and heartbreak. Mary Henderson visited one afternoon when the children were about 5 and 3, settling at the kitchen table for coffee and gossip as she had done 100 times before. "You remember that social, years ago when Wyatt first took you dancing?" Mary asked. "When you were so worried about what people would think," Clara smiled, pouring coffee. "I remember. I was so scared that night of so many things. Look at you now. 2 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, a husband who adores you. You made the right choice saying yes to that dance." "It was the easiest and hardest decision I ever made," Clara admitted. "I felt so guilty at first, like I was betraying Thomas by being happy again. But I realized eventually that love does not work that way. Loving Wyatt does not mean I did not love Thomas. My heart just expanded to hold both past and present." "That is a beautiful way to see it," Mary said softly. "And I think Thomas would be proud of you, of what you have built here." Clara looked out the window at Wyatt and the children, at the ranch stretching out under the blue Utah sky. "I think he would too." Time continued its steady march. William grew tall and strong, learning everything Wyatt could teach him about ranching. Rose was bright and curious, driving Clara to distraction with her endless questions, but also making her laugh every single day. In 1889, Clara gave birth to twins, 2 more boys they named James and Samuel. The house was louder than ever, but Wyatt took it all in stride, somehow managing to give each child individual attention despite the chaos. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wyatt surprised Clara with a trip, arranging for Mary to watch the children so they could spend a few days alone. They rode up into the mountains, camping under the stars like they had when they were courting, talking and laughing and remembering. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked one night as they lay side by side watching the fire. "Taking a chance on a grieving widow with nothing to her name?" Wyatt propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with those green eyes she still loved so much. "Not for a single second. You are my home, Clara. You and those crazy children of ours and that ranch. Everything I ever wanted I found with you." "I never thought I could be this happy again," Clara confessed. "After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. But you showed me that hearts can heal, that love can come more than once if you are brave enough to accept it. You saved me in more ways than just paying off that debt." We saved each other, Wyatt corrected gently. I was lost before I found you, just drifting through life without purpose. You gave me somewhere to belong, someone to love. We built this life together, and I would not change a single thing about it. They kissed under the star-strewn sky, still as in love as they had been that night at the social when everything changed with a single dance. The children grew, as children do. William took over more responsibility on the ranch, proving he had his father's skill with horses and his mother's head for business. Rose discovered a talent for drawing, filling sketchbooks with pictures of the ranch, the animals, her family. The twins were inseparable, getting into trouble together but also watching out for each other with fierce loyalty. When Clara turned 42, Wyatt threw her a surprise party, inviting everyone they knew to the ranch for a celebration. Clara stood on the porch she had defended so fiercely years ago, surrounded by friends and family, watching her husband laugh with their children, and felt profoundly grateful for every twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. That night, after everyone had gone home and the children were in bed, Clara and Wyatt sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. "You remember the day we met?" Clara asked. "You rode up asking for work, and I had nothing to offer you but problems." "Best day of my life," Wyatt said simply. "From the moment I saw you standing on this porch, trying to be brave even though you were terrified, I knew you were special. I just did not know yet that you were everything. I was so desperate that day. That bank notice in my pocket felt like a death sentence, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had not even said. I am glad I listened when Henry at the feed store mentioned you might need help. I almost rode on to the next town, but something told me to come out here first." "Fate," Clara said softly. "It had to be fate. How else do you explain everything working out so perfectly? You having the money I needed, me having the land you wanted, both of us finding love when neither of us was looking for it." "I do not know if I believe in fate," Wyatt said thoughtfully. "But I believe some things are meant to be. And us, this life we built, our family, that was definitely meant to be." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted from the barn. A calf called for its mother. The wind whispered through the grass. "Thank you," Clara said eventually, "for everything. For saving my ranch, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life, for asking for that one dance." Wyatt squeezed her hand. "That dance changed everything, did it not? One moment of courage from both of us, and look where it led. To here, to home, to happiness." "Exactly." Wyatt stood, pulling Clara to her feet. "Dance with me now, no music, no crowd, just us." Clara laughed, but moved into his arms, and they swayed together on the porch under the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first dance all those years ago. They had both been through loss and hardship, had both known grief and struggle. But they had found each other in the midst of it all, had built something lasting and true from the ruins of what came before. As they danced, Clara thought about the woman she had been that terrible day with the bank notice, drowning in debt and despair, seeing no way forward. She wished she could tell that woman that help was coming, that love would find her again, that she would not just survive but thrive. That a cowboy would ride up to her fence asking for work, and he would give her so much more than that. He would give her hope, partnership, love, and a future brighter than anything she could have imagined. But that woman could not have heard it then. She had to live through it, had to experience every moment of fear and courage and falling in love, had to learn that endings are sometimes just new beginnings in disguise. "What are you thinking about?" Wyatt asked, feeling her smile against his chest. "About how lucky I am. About how one kind gesture from a stranger became everything. About how glad I am that I said yes to that dance." Just one dance, Wyatt murmured, echoing his words from so long ago. That is all I asked for, and I gave you a lifetime instead. Best trade I ever made. They laughed together, still swaying, still in love after all these years and all that life had thrown at them. The ranch spread out around them in the darkness, solid and real and theirs. Inside the house, their children slept safely in their beds. The cattle were healthy, the land was productive, and the future stretched ahead full of promise. Clara had been drowning once, pulled under by grief and debt, and the weight of trying to survive alone. But Wyatt had thrown her a lifeline with his unexpected offer of help, had pulled her to safety, and then stayed to build a life by her side. He had asked for just one dance, but what he had really given her was the courage to live again, to love again, to believe in second chances. And Clara, who had thought her story was ending that day with the bank notice, had discovered it was really just beginning. Sometimes the darkest moments come right before the dawn. Sometimes salvation arrives in the form of a dusty cowboy on a buckskin horse. Sometimes one dance is all it takes to change everything. As they stood on the porch, held close in each other's arms, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The journey had been hard, the losses real, but they had led her here, to this man, this life, this moment of perfect contentment. She had been saved by a cowboy's kindness. Yes, but more than that, she had been saved by the willingness to accept help, to take chances, to open her heart again when every instinct said to keep it locked away. Years later, when they were old and gray and their children had children of their own, people would still talk about Clara and Wyatt Patterson. About how they met when she was at her lowest and he gave her everything expecting nothing in return. About how a single dance at a town social became the beginning of a legendary love story. About how the ranch became one of the most successful in the county through their combined efforts and dedication. But Clara and Wyatt never paid much attention to what people said. They were too busy living their life, enjoying every moment they had together. They had learned through loss and hardship that time was precious and love was the most valuable thing in the world. They did not waste a single day of the gift they had been given. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a massive celebration. The whole town came, along with family from across the state. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and a few tears. Someone brought a fiddle, and music filled the air just like it had that night at the social so many years before. Wyatt, now 78 but still strong and steady, led Clara, 74 and still beautiful in his eyes, onto the makeshift dance floor. The crowd quieted, watching as the couple who had been through so much together swayed to the music, lost in each other as they always had been. "Just one dance," Wyatt whispered in her ear, and Clara laughed, the sound as bright and joyful as it had been when she was 24. "Just one dance," she agreed. That lasted a lifetime. And as they danced, surrounded by the family and community they had built together, in the place they had fought so hard to keep and had turned into a legacy, Clara sent up a silent prayer of gratitude, for second chances, for unexpected kindness, for the courage to say yes to that first dance, for every moment since. The music played on, carrying them through the evening and into the rest of their lives, together until the very end, proving that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with loss and end with everything you never knew you needed.